Hey everybody, welcome to a way more intelligent episode of the podcast, at least that is my hope. This was the brainchild of our very own Thor. This is a podcast that is going to be very near and dear to his heart, owing to the guest and the topic at hand. As you might have seen from the title, this is our podcast on world building and writing. And of course, it needs to feature somebody who is familiar with both those concepts, and it just so happens that we have two of those. I mentioned Thor. Thor is here. Say hi, Thor.
Hi, everybody. I'm so chill and I'm so emotional ready for this journey.
And we have, of course, our narrative designer, Sam, who is the leading authority of all things writing as it pertains to Ember Sword. Say hi to the good people, Sam.
Oh, what? I'm not just messing with you. Hey, everyone, how are you doing? Always happy to do these.
Right. So, the purpose of this podcast is to shed some light on how the world of Ember Sword is sort of created, in a sense. And to go into deeper writing topics from there. Those among you who are lore fiends, those among you who are writers, those among you, hell, who are interested in the building blocks of storytelling are gonna have a hell of a time with this episode. And I would like to start with you guys' experience. Let us start with Thor. How long have you been writing and when did you start?
All right, so I've been writing on and off for 10, 15 years. I started when I was around 15 years old, and that might be. I don't actually know if that's young to start. Well, I can hear that from Sam later. If that's old to start, but I started around 15 years old, and I started. I would say doodling because I didn't know I was writing. I was just doing something, and it just happened to be more and more. And the end of it, I slapped a book down upon a table in front of my father and told him I wrote a book, and the context here is my father is also a writer. And he was just as shocked as I was to see that I have actually written a book, because that was not the intent of it, right? It was a spark, it was a story that built itself. But then I actually... obviously it wasn't a book. Like what I dropped in front of him was a sketch or a draft or something that would probably be wrong to call it a book, but that would be an insulting statement. But it became a book, right? In the end, and I had a little sister that in this process had heart surgery. Very well, it is serious in nature when it's heart surgery, right? But she could very well not have lived through it, but she did. Of course, have to add that she's fine today. But at just when we were letting her go for this heart surgery, I promised her to finish the book, and that kept giving me the drive. I don't know what would have happened if I haven't promised her that, but it was my drive, and I dedicated the book to her. And one of the main characters are even heavily inspired by some of her greatest traits in life. So yeah, that's how I got started when I was 15, 16 years old.
That is quite emotionally charged. I mean, I have a couple of writer friends, and their beginnings are usually born out of an idea they had, and yours is that on top of something very touching, which is quite awesome. Sam, what about you?
I don't know how I can compete with that story.
Yeah,
because
it's coming out swinging here.
Straight, heartfelt. You're like you're the protagonist of someone else's story right there about a writer.
Oh, that's thank you.
I started writing when I was 7, so that was 23 years ago, 1998. It was I was big into the Animorphs books, and they're simplistic books, no offense to Catherine Applegate, but come on, they are. And so, it was basically, as close to ground level as you can with an actual novel format. So I started writing these fan fiction stories, and I read them not too long ago. Well, actually, it was a while ago. It was 10 years ago. I read them again, and I like laughed my ass off because of how they were written. In the first page, like the villain, like Visor 3 describes how his blade ship got destroyed. Damn, he said, I'm going to have to buy more parts at the grocery store. And things like that. Then, I kept on working at it. And it was mostly, like, I wanted to say that they were original stories, but really I saw The Mummy, and then I created a story that was suspiciously similar to The Mummy. And then 2 years later, after I wrote the first Animorphs fan fiction, I took another attempt, and I thought this was so much better. Now I'm 9 years old, but it was still pretty hysterical then, and I thought I was so clever, filling an entire page and calling it a paragraph at a time. But no, it started out with fan fiction and just really grew from there until I started taking serious attempts at writing when I was about 14. Actually, like, okay, this is the best story I could come up with, and I got the nuances of writing with grammatically down. However, the qualities of the stories, I'd say that they only started getting actually noticeable, close to professional level by the time I was in college. So it was a climb for sure. That we're talking like almost like 12, 13 years from when I started as a little kid.
I would like to build on top of your humble fanfiction beginnings and to illustrate how far you can get with drive. I have, oh my god, behind me, and like 3 people know this, a 150-page journal full of a Skyrim playthrough fanfic, which will never, and I mean never, see the light of day.
Wow. Wow.
And one of the most mature things I did when approaching that was on the first page, I wrote beneath just the title of the game, embarrassing but earnest. And that, I think, is one of the most important things you can do when aspiring to be a writer, recognizing that you're going to write absolute garbage, but if you persevere and stick with it, you can take it somewhere. And you guys are, I mean, not, especially in Sam's case with starting with what he described as bad fanfiction, it's a testament to the power of perseverance. So to get back to good writing from the bad writing, what do you guys consider to be the most important elements of good writing? Thor?
And thank you for calling what I do good writing.
I mean, I cannot say anything else from how heartfelt your tale was. I mean, this is hard assumption on my part, but yes.
Well, I think I ran out of. It sounded like I had a different start than Sam. Like I didn't practice it. As far as I remember, I just started out with it, and it was like I didn't even knew what I was doing. Like, I guess everybody feels like that, but I didn't know I wanted to be a writer. I didn't know I even wanted to write, right? So that was a weird sentence, but I didn't know. So I just did it, and it ended up, I think, okay in the end. But for me, I ran out of books to read, so
wow.
I needed, yeah, and obviously I didn't do that because you can't do that, but I ran out of books I wanted to read, right? Mm-hmm. At least at that time. So, I wrote my own book because, I needed something to read. It's so dumb, but it's kind of what happened. So for me, it's like you write the book you want to read, and it kind of stuck with me. It kind of stuck with me that you need to be the biggest fan of your book in some ways, right? You need to want to read the book you're writing. Like, that's important for me. Because otherwise, I think you lose the magic of wanting to write it in the first place. And so it needs to be intrinsic for me. Other than that, I'm very inspired by Tolkien. Maybe not so much his writing, but his world building, right? I am heavily inspired. I actually have a tattoo on my right arm in Elvish, in Tengvar language. In the cursive black speech variant, which says in the closest translation to English, it says, "Writing is crafting a soulful universe for others to enter, but for yourself to find peaceful shelter." and it kind of addresses, how I approach writing, that I write for myself, and for myself to find shelter for all these thoughts and ideas. But of course, I want to share them with the rest of the people afterwards.
So it's essentially write for yourself and the audience will come. That is what you consider. That's very poignant. Sam, what is your perspective on the most important elements of good writing?
Well, I'd say that having a good plan in place is critical, unless the point of your story is that there's not a plan. Like stories like Boyhood, which is a movie.
It took 12 years to make.
It was all about being organic and fluid, with them doing rewrites until like hours before the shoot. So I'd say that having a plan where it is possible to have a plan, that will be important, because if you have to make things up too much, then it gets problematic. However, I think that what is tantamount with that is good characters, people in your movie, in your book, in your video game that have a good voice, where you won't just be Neil Breen playing every character.
Oh, hell yeah, my man.
Hello, I am the main character. I am a husband, and then you see a little girl, Daddy, I'm 4 years old. If you don't have a voice, if your characters aren't fleshed out, it's going to actually really show, because it's this is fake. And even though we know that fantasy world is fantasy fiction, you still want to be able to believe. You want it to be real. So I think that having a good voice and good characters are important, because after you have your outline, then when you reach those scenes, your characters are going to start to build it for you. You're going to have this scene that might be a little different than what you had anticipated, but it'll be organic. So it's basically, I guess that I created an Ouroboros of it has to be organic. It also has to make sense. And with that, you bring in characters who are real and are fleshed out, and you can let them do everything for you.
I cannot believe that, of all things, I did not expect a Neil Breen reference on the podcast when I woke up today.
Look where
out of
we
all
have ended
things,
up.
you cannot accuse the world's premier auteur, Neil Breen, of not having a vision for his projects. That vision might be, I'm the best, I wear cool vests, and aliens run the government, and the government sucks. It's sort of a through line. Guys, oh my god, if you've not seen Neil Breen movies, I will be in chat once this is airing. Please ask me for recommendations. He is the world's greatest movie maker. Back on topic.
Yeah,
thanks, Sam.
Alongside Tommy Wiseau. They're way up there.
Neil Breen's like Tommy Wiseau, but he keeps making things, and they just keep getting... Anyway, Jesus Christ. So, to build upon the previous question, just to illustrate those important elements of good writing, what would you guys consider your favorite book or world? Again, keeping the theme here, Thor.
So, in context with what Sam said, I really agree, because characters in fantasy worlds can sometimes feel more real than real world, right? Because sometimes the real world actually feels kind of flat and fake. That's the deep truth of the real world, right? So escapism is real here, right? So I would say I already presented Tolkien as something who heavily inspired me as well. Mostly his world building, not all of his books. But and this is going back to when you introduced me, Svetlin, on these amazing podcasts. Thank you. The Witcher world is something that I really, really do enjoy, and it's actually both the world building and the books by Sapkowski, or how you pronounce it. Sorry if I pronounced it wrong. But it's so raw and it's so wild, and it feels so real because it is so raw, and it's like he's not trying to veil something to protect me. He's unleashing it on me, and I like it. So that's it for me. Those books I really like them.
You have stated as much, so yeah, that tracks. Sam?
I would say that my I'm not sure if I'd say it's my favorite so far as like books are concerned, but I really do enjoy Tolkien as well. And it's the way that's laid out precisely by Tolkien, not Peter Jackson. I'll get to that in a second. Because yes, here we go. But Tolkien, he interlaces his world as he goes. And that is quite impressive. He doesn't need a separate appendix, which he does. He has those, lots of those, hundreds of pages long.
Yep.
But as he goes, he tells you what you need to know, which tells you in turn that when he wrote The Lord of the Rings, he was not just laying it out as he was going. There was a plan. There was a backup plan to that backup. There were backups, everywhere, A through Z, and he was able to enlighten us as he went. And I think that the reason why, may I say that I said it only extends to Tolkien and not the person who adapted his works or continues to, Peter Jackson, is because with The Lord of the Rings, Jackson achieved a wonder where he was able to show off The Lord of the Rings, something that was considered unfilmable for the better part of a century, and he's able to impart what we needed to know without going overboard. However, the way that we know that he himself cannot do that, he cannot create his own glossary, is with the Hobbit movies.
I know where we're going.
Where,
yeah, sorry.
where he took one story which had that had plenty going for it already with the appendices. We could have gone around with the necromancer story and it would have been beautiful, but he didn't give us that. He gave us that and all sorts of things that he explicitly made up, and it stood out like a sore thumb, and it showed you there was a master artist involved named Tolkien, and he wasn't named Peter Jackson with that. And I think that was a perfect showcase. And may I also say, while I'm here, on the flip side, what is not a good element of world building, what has not shown to be good with world building, is Star Wars. And before people are like, what? Let me say that go watch the movie Dune, or better yet, read Dune, because yes, that is not only what Star Wars is based off of, people. Not only is that the truth, but you have fantastic, amazing, beautiful world building there, where each planet has its own culture that feels like it has basked there for thousands of years. It's world-like. While in Star Wars, when you think of a world, it's hey, here's a desert planet, or in the sequel's case, here's a desert planet, kinda, sorta. Yeah, and,
I'm dying.
Yeah. And there's they have other hey, this one kinda has a forest on it, and it's a planet. Yeah, it's a planet. And there you go. That's the world building of Star Wars.
It is world building in the literal sense, where there's a planet. That's it for the not. I would say, superficially speaking, of course, just so I can avoid 19 million hate comments. Although love comments, please send them for that sweet engagement. Star Wars can be very well thought out, depending on who the auteur is.
Yes,
I mean, same with.
Yes.
If I may defend Peter Jackson for a second, The Hobbit the film series was more a commercial decision than an artistic one, where if I remember correctly, they brought him back and he didn't really care about making it all too long. And then they threw a whole bunch of money at him and he was like, well, throw my hands up in the air. I'm going to give you something, but it's not going to be on the level of The Lord of the Rings because there ain't enough meat on those bones.
And it was definitely something, it was enjoyable, right? But it was not what we wanted or what we had. Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro was attached for the longest time, and then, he left it, and Peter Jackson had to jump in, and then they're like, okay, let's do 3 movies, and then they started shooting the 3rd one before they even finished with a script. That tells you everything.
I didn't know that. All right.
Yay, Hollywood.
Explain something. That explains a lot of things.
I would like to stick with the topic of world building. Sam, how do you approach world building?
I start at the base level with what story I want to tell, because believe it or not, people, I actually have the story I want to tell with Ember Sword, beginning to end. But then after I have completed that, then I approach, what characters I need to tell my story and what parts of the world are needed for those characters to be at. And then after that, it's like this everlasting tangential dance of I need a part of the world, I need a character, and it goes on and on, and each feeds off of each other. And also, I think I've mentioned this in previous podcasts, once I have one character, that gives me the fuel for 5 additional characters.
Yes.
And and so they keep on telling their own little stories, and after God knows how many years, it's gonna be like, well, what do you know? We have a full moon now. Okay, that was a pun, that I did not intend, but I am owning it right here and now.
Which you should. Nice.
Stamp of approval on that one. That's interesting, because for the longest time, and I've kept repeating this, I've always said you went character first, but it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the outline of a narrative that comes first, and then you populate that narrative with characters on which you sort of build more narrative. I mean, you did use the word Ouroboros. I apologize.
Yeah,
However you pronounce it.
Yeah, characters, the characters, they're my lady, so to speak, but I still have to, know what story I want to tell, and I had a ton of free reign to come up with the one for Ember Sword.
Awesome to hear. I mean, of course, we've done a lot of lore casts, and a lot of that is very self-evident in the way you've structured short stories, in the way you've talked about the world of Thanabus and of Ember Sword, and by extension, it's an awesome thing to just keep reiterating. Thor, you being the forever DM, must have. What is your approach to world building?
Yeah, so I like what Sam said earlier about finding the voice, because as one who have done a lot of D&D and LARPing, I am very I actually build a movie in my mind before I write, because I have to visualize everything for me, like their voice, how they look, not in details, but like a dream, right? You think you have the details, but you might not have all the details. It's like a dream. It seems real, right? Mm-hmm. And feels real, and that's what I start with. Like, I have to imagine the characters. I have to be able to imagine how they interact, and it's very visual for me when I write. It's almost like when I write, I almost forget I'm typing, and it feels like I am, and I have no knowledge of how to actually instruct the movie, but it feels like I'm instructing the movie which I'm writing. And I don't even know if it makes sense, because I have no expertise with that. But that's what I feel like when I do it. So for me, it's very visual, and I cannot draw, but I often draw a lot. Like, I draw maps, I draw weapons, I sketch weapons or personal traits just for me. Like, nobody else is gonna see it. Maybe my wife and my little sister, which is my biggest fan. So, but so I visualize it. And if I can't visualize it, it's difficult for me to own it. But characters means a lot to me, so I am completely aligned with Sam.
That is very impressive, actually. I mean, that's a phenomenal ability to have.
I actually have a thought about that. Like, when I conceptualize a story, I actually see it as a moving painting. I can't actually think of it in terms of actors. And like with my short film from, was it 2014, that was called Alistair Templeton, I actually did not think of them in terms of actors at all. And then we set up the camera, we turned it on, and I saw what the film would be. I was like, oh my God, really? That's a person. So, yeah, I can't describe the feeling that came about when I saw that for the first time.
that this segues quite nicely. This is sort of almost a context break for everybody listening. Besides video games, what other mediums do you work with or in?
Well, funny enough, I've read comments that have been like, "Hey, who is Samuel Horton?" And oh, he used to be in Hollywood. It's like, excuse me, used to be? I'm very much still involved with the film scene. I have a few screenplays that are orbiting producers. It's like, okay, here we go. Is this it? Is it it? And kind of. Dare I say, use the term like around a toilet bowl almost with water going down. But yeah, I'm involved with film. I have something here and there brewing. Including an anthology exploration. So we're gonna see where that goes. But I, also have been involved with board games, with which kind of I accidentally fell into just because I was a writer needing a job a few years ago, and I suddenly wrote 36 Monopoly games. And
What?
It's like, oh, no,
That's a lot.
yeah, my full-time job was to write Monopoly games, and it's like, oh, now I have like a ton of games I've technically designed, and they're sold in Walmart. And so, yeah, the board games, they just kind of happened, and which is kind of funny because I also, like I've mentioned, I have a passion project that I have going on in the background called Star Thieves, and yeah, that was originally a board game that I co-created while in college, and it's is honestly the one thing from college that I wanted to do something with, because the rest it's like, oh, look at that. Okay, time for it to put on my big boy pants. But that was the one thing I was actually proud of, where it's like I want to make this into something. So I kind of am, and but basically I like to, I won't ever say that I'm, well, I guess I have to if I keep on getting work, film video game writer, but I never want to limit myself to one medium. Like there are ones I'm the best at, which is like film and video game, but I just if there's a potential for me to do something, I'll take it. I've yet to find the appeal with narrative podcasts, but who knows? But so far, I trust you, Svetlin, far more than I trust myself with managing those.
I cannot believe I'm in a call with the king of game nights and flyover states. Monopoly in Walmart. Hell yes. I've been workshopping that sentence for the past 30 seconds. Which, I don't know how to segue into asking Thor the same question, but Thor, anything besides video games?
Yeah, well, I don't think I've explored as many mediums as Sam have. I primarily got into books and short stories, and I have published a saga called the Sylvan Saga, which is 5 books, which I think I published between 18 and 23 years old. And now I've had a writer's block for like 5 years, so I hope we get around to that. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, not kidding. Kind of true. But what I mostly do is D&D, and that should be of no surprise by now. And I approach D&D a little bit like book writing, actually. So I end up writing a lot for my D&D sessions. I create my worlds. I write out a lot of scripts, dialogue. 66% of what I make is probably never hitting the table. So I do a lot of work, and it's like a story. It's epic storytelling is what I'm trying to read, right? So I think that has kind of taken the role of what I used to do with book writing. But I want to get back in it, and my current D&D world is actually in one of the worlds I have built for probably my next series of books, if I'm ever gonna come around to it. So they're actually playing in that world with the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, right? But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons and books is primarily what I'm involved in. Yeah.
Ouroboros seems to be the word of the day here, because you were taking ideas from your D&D campaign to influence your own writing, which is, like, I'm coming to find out, very standard practice. One of my best friends is doing the exact same. So It's awesome to know that it's a widespread habit. Well, widespread, 2 people I know, but hey, still more than one.
Probably, yeah. It just feels so natural. Like for one that's doing it, it's so easy to do. Like it feels as long as you're ready to explore your own world and share it, which I think you should be. It's good.
Speaking of your own world, I would like to veer back into plot and characters. How do you guys go about developing your plot and characters? Thor?
So we already touched a little bit about it, about my little sister, and I would just like, I base a lot of characters, and this is also what you said, Sam, about bringing a voice to a character, right? I base a lot of my characters on people, but before we get too far, like it's based in a way that if you didn't know that person really, really well, you would not know it, right? It's only for those who would. So it's like deep traits of a person, or it's like edges of a trait in a person that I think that's very interesting. And sometimes I only realize after having made a character that it's actually based on a good friend or a family member, or someone I love, or something I like, or someone I really don't like, right? It can also be that way. But it's always like, it's not one-to-one. It's a little piece of a trait from a person, right? And for me, that's what I think makes it real for me. Like, that's what makes it easy for me to give the character that voice. I think I go about that. The plot thing, I'm still very much learning, because as I've said, my first books, I just went with it. And I kind of had to fix a lot of things along the way, because I did what Sam said I shouldn't do, but I didn't know Sam back then. So I'm still learning about that now. So I'm curious to hear what Sam is going to say. Because I could need some more planning when I write my next books.
Well, Sam, you heard the man.
Yeah. I first come up with the central idea, and this is kind of ironic, but most of my modern stories actually are adapted from dreams. So basically, I come up with a core idea, which could be like a weird scene that happens in a dream, and it's like, okay, how does that fit into it? Like, what kind of plot would it make sense for this batshit insane, bizarre, monstrosity? How could you have this play into it? And then after that, it's kind of like a balancing act of how to expand it without having it pop, essentially, because I feel like the worst kind of writer's block is actually when you force yourself to make a plot outline where a part is not inspired. And so you basically have to find the plot that you are most inspired by, and you won't feel like there's a single bland scene in your story, where each part can be interesting, where someone can say, wow, it was not just 2 people talking, it was 2 people talking about something that was crazy. This, like, talking about something that was interesting. And of course, like the characters, I feel like the biggest challenge is to not map out their strengths, but to map out their vulnerabilities. You find what makes them human, not what makes them, a Mary Sue or an amazing warrior or a great leader, or someone who has an iron grip on the northern hemisphere of Thanabus. I think that finding, what makes them human and what you can relate to, that is the most imperative component when you come up with a character. Because, it just, how do I say this? Like, because at that point you're not really playing with superheroes anymore. You're not playing with the archetype. You're playing with an actual person. It's otherwise you might as well have action figures. You might as well have like an 8-year-old tell you your story, for you. So basically you have to find where there's weakness. And teaser, everyone, teaser.
Ooh.
The Severand plot is actually one of the central themes about it is, vulnerability. which how the community has interpreted some things. I think that they're in for a great show once we actually release Severand. They're going to see a plot that might be quite different than what they anticipated. It's not how it has all seemed. How it's all seemed is basically how I've wanted you all to see it.
That was a DM move right there. I guess it's also a writer move. You have seen it how I wanted you to see it.
I feel like you've flubbed some dice rolls, Thor. Like, that sounded so ominous. Lift that screen. Let me see that nat 20.
I couldn't stop it. Sorry, it was just, yeah, that's how I say it.
Sam, you inadvertently touched upon one of the big ticket items of the podcast, writer's block. The original concept of this podcast was born out of Thor's desire to know how you get over writer's block, because it's something that all creatives struggle with in one form or another. I know I've had various encounters with that dreaded curse over, where it was recording crappy YouTube videos with my friends, or like video essays, or writing blog posts, or Ember Sword. It's always rearing its head in one form or another. So, I mean, trying to learn from the best here. Sam, how do you approach getting over writer's block?
I'm trying to find a nice way to say you don't. Let me say that when you have writer's block, it's actually critical that you put the pen down and find something else to do. And that does not mean go eat a banana or go for a walk. No, you find something else creative to do, because there's always something else you can do, perhaps on another project. And with an MMO, what we're making right now, there isn't room for us to dilly-daddle, but there is room for us to work on another component of the project. So when I reach a point where it's like, I don't know what I can do, next, like what happened when it came to writing to getting from point A to point Z with the Ediso plot, I had to find something else to work on with the project until it hit me. So I'd say that there, has Stephen Hawking said, there's always something that you can do. That when there's life, that there's that. And so basically, do that. Don't torture yourself, and don't write just for the sake of writing, because you're going to delete it, the next day when you read it and realize that was super mediocre or not what you wanted. It will be.
Yeah, I've done that.
Bland scenes. I have this a screenplay that is in front of my favorite producer, and I just am thinking back to when I was writing the screenplay. I took it with me when I was on vacation, and I did not know how I should write the scenes, so I just wrote them, and then I got back from vacation, read it, and I was like, oh, look at that, and then I deleted the last 15 pages of it. Okay, let's...
Oh my god.
So, basically, do or do not, and, find something else that you can work on. Be productive, keep those juices flowing, anywhere where you know where you can come up with something that you could write that you actually feel, because if you don't feel it, then that's actually worse, in my opinion, than not writing at all.
Very, very well said. Well, Thor, you and I here are very much the students, but you are published authors, so nevertheless, I would like to extend the same courtesy to you. Do you have any approaches to tackling writer's block?
Yeah, so it seems like I'm already doing what the senpai said I should do, right? So it feels like, because, I'm being very creative. Like, I have so many D&D campaigns. I am writing stuff. I have friends who are trying to be writers. Sometimes I help them. I do creative work also here on Ember Sword, right? As much as I am able to. So for me, I guess it's the feeling of I am actually starting to kind of miss writing a story. Just me, because D&D is with people and Ember Sword is with people, and I'm kind of starting to miss just writing a book. Going on this kind of lonely journey, at least in the beginning, but I'm missing it, and I'm looking forward to it, and I can feel it itching, right? Like 10 years ago when I started, or more than that probably. So I think it's just like I'm starting to feel this urge to try and do it again, because so many years, like I'm double the age I was back then. So so much has happened. So I want to try and do it again, right?
Yep.
But it makes a lot of sense what Sam is saying. But maybe if you ask me in a couple of years, I will have some advice.
We'll get back to you on that. Putting that down on the schedule. And to close out this very productive episode, I would say, is a classic question in when, two creatives get together. What advice would you give to a writer / world builder regarding their first project? Sam?
Just thinking of how, the most delicate way to, describe it.
Oh, shoot from the hip. We are
yeah.
used to dealing out the hard punches. Go for it.
Yeah. I think that you should, when you start out, you should not go into it expecting that it's going to be Harry Potter. Don't have this be the one that you go all in on. When you first make your world, I'd say that when you make it, make it so it's efficient. Don't create extraneous landmarks in your world map that we'll never see, where we'll never see it in the story, because they'll just people will start to notice low effort. Basically, go with what you need and expand from there. And don't feel discouraged. Don't give up. Just know what you need, and that will get you through everything. Just what you need here and now.
Very well said. Don't, in essence, don't overexert yourself trying to, create the Silmarillion, I guess.
Yeah, maybe this is a little mean, but there's this self-published author called Gloria Tesh, and she has a book series called Maradonia, and in the intro there's a map where there are places called Nissan Falls and Ortega, which is kind of funny, because it's south. So, but it's like you don't actually see any of these places in the story. It's like you put all this effort into this map and this world building without, building the characters first. So basically, look at a map and remove everything that you don't need, and basically follow the blueprints. Don't try to build before you actually know what you're building.
Mm-hmm. Nissan Falls is what happened when their CEO got arrested a couple of years ago. Anyway, Thor.
Yeah.
I just want to pinpoint how good advice that is, because that series I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons in, which is from my own world building, probably my future books, right? It's such a massive world I have created, and I have drafted it so many times that I have vastly no idea of which story I want to tell by now, because it's such a big world. So that makes a lot of sense, Sam. Would have wished you would have told me earlier, but that would have been an anomaly, right? So, okay. I would say just do it. It's a lot simple, but I was, as one who just did it, and it went pretty well, and it changed so many things in my life, and it was such a good journey. And it was I have so many friends and colleagues who want to do it, and it's so easy, right? But just do it. So don't think about doing it right or wrong. Just do it to begin with, because you'll just you'll get caught by it, and suddenly you'll have something in front of you. And I will say do it and don't look back, and don't second doubt yourself. Don't hesitate, and it's a lonely journey, at least for me, but it has to be sometimes. But don't forget to share it. It doesn't have to be lonely all the time. So, for example, share it with your siblings, your best friends, or colleagues. At some point in this journey, you have to share it. So go on the journey, don't look back, and remember to share it before the end, right? Yeah, that's it.
Beautifully said. And that is a fantastic note to end on. Thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to participate in this super useful, just deep dive into how you guys' minds work as professional creatives. This was an awesome episode to record, and I really hope that those among you who are aspiring to one day follow in the footsteps of the awesome guests of this podcast have taken something away from this. So thank you once again for participating, guys. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey you made it to the end. Congratulations! That must mean you like us enough to want more, right? Well, good news! We're all over the internet. Go to embersword.com and subscribe to our newsletter for a chance to play the game early, as well as the latest interesting tidbits on the game and the team. Join our lovely Discord community over at discord.gg/embersword. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at PlayEmbersword for regular updates on what we're up to. And remember the basics. Drink water, be kind to each other, and spread the word about Ember Sword.